Joining me now exclusively is Rear Admiral John Kirby, who's the Pentagon's press secretary. Admiral, thanks for being here. So just to run through these options again that we've been told, some of the options for the president to review. He's meeting with his national security team tonight. They include manned and unmanned but not armed surveillance flights, more intelligence gathering, airstrikes if the intelligence is sufficient, and withdrawing more Americans. On this point of withdrawing Americans, we know we have this amphibious assault vehicle with over 500 Marines on board that could assist with any sort of emergency embassy evacuation. What are the odds right now, does the Pentagon think, of such an evacuation, and how safe are the people at the U.S. Embassy?
A couple of thoughts here. First, the embassy is a very safe compound. You've probably been there yourself, Jake. It's big. It's well protected. There is no request by the State Department for any kind of evacuation. The embassy is still up and running, still operational. It's true that they relocated some of the personnel over the weekend, but again, the embassy's open for business. And look, I mean, this is always a tough call, you know, how you make these kinds of decisions about whether to move or not to move. We are postured and ready should the State Department require that, but there has been no request, none at all. The embassy's still open.
Was this an intelligence failure? Did the U.S. Government not know that ISIS was gaining strength and was going to be heading towards Baghdad?
We have been watching ISIL, ISIS, however you want to refer to it. We've been watching their growth and development for some time now. Absolutely not an intelligence failure, none at all. We have been constantly monitoring the situation in Iraq, and we've been staying in touch with Iraqi government officials throughout. Don't forget, you still have, and have had since 2011, a small number of U.S. troops working out of the embassy there, as well as a pretty robust country team from the State Department there. So this is something we've been watching for a long time. Yes, they move pretty quick. And yes, as I said Friday, we were surprised and disappointed at how some of the Iraqi security forces failed to meet those threats up in the north. But it's not something we haven't been watching.
The Associated Press, I'm told, is reporting right now that the U.S. government is considering sending a small special operations team to Iraq, to Baghdad, to assist in some manner there to assist the Iraqi government. Is there anything you can tell me about that?
No, Jake. Actually, I'm not going to get ahead of options that the president may or may not use, and I certainly don't want to get ahead of decisions that he hasn't made yet. As I said before, our job at the Pentagon is to plan and to prepare and to tee him up options that are as robust as he wants to consider.
But that would be one of many options that would be on the table.
Well, again, I don't want to prejudge options here.
I want you to listen to what Secretary of State John Kerry had to say to Yahoo earlier today when asked if ISIS could take Baghdad.
I don't believe that they will in the near term, certainly, and I don't believe they necessarily can at all, but that remains to be determined.
Does ISIS have the capability of taking Baghdad?
Look, they certainly have proven capable of grabbing ground. There's no question about that. Baghdad's a different matter. And every indication that we have right now is that the Iraqi security forces are going to fight very, very hard to defend Baghdad. And I think that's exactly what Secretary Kerry was referring to. Should they want to do it, and I don't know what their intentions are, it's going to be difficult. Baghdad is a different beast altogether from the other smaller places that they have taken. But look, larger, we're all aware of this threat inside Iraq, and there's a shared sense of urgency here, and I think that's why the president is making it very important to spend time talking to his advisors, having meetings, and working through this decision-making process.
On the question of whether or not the U.S. should talk to Iran about trying to help with this situation, in some ways it almost seems like a moot point. Maliki is Shiite, Iran is Shiite. They are very closely allied. Reportedly, there are Iranian forces in Iraq right now. There certainly are advisors. If the United States moves to help Iraq, aren't we de facto working with Iran since they are so much a part of advising Maliki?
Our discussions are with the Iraqi government, and from a military perspective, it's with Iraqi security forces. And again, I'd remind you, we've been working with them since 2011, since the end of the combat mission in Iraq. There are no plans to consult with Iran about military activities inside Iraq. And our message to Iran is the same as it is to all the neighbors out there. We want a constructive role here. We want you to respect Iraqi sovereignty and territorial integrity.
But the U.S. has also said they want to work with all the players in the region. So if the U.S. went and were to meet with Maliki, and there were other players from the region in the room, that's not something that the U.S. would discount, right?
Well, we have said we want to work with neighbors and partners. I wouldn't get into that particular hypothetical. And look, you know there's talks going on in Vienna right now,
right.
P5+1. I think it's certainly reasonable to expect that there could be, on the sidelines of those discussions, some informal discussions with Iranian leaders about what's going on in Iraq. But there's no plans to consult with them about military activities, certainly not military activities we are potentially could conduct inside Iraq.
Just the people at home. Should the American people be prepared for the United States to go to war again in Iraq?
I think the President's been very clear that he does not foresee a return to troops on the ground in a combat mission in Iraq. What he has said is he's willing to look at a range of options, not all of them military, a range of options, to try to break the momentum of ISIL in there. And he's also been very clear that should he elect a military option, it would be limited in scope, in both scope and duration.
Just to clarify, combat operations not the same thing as special forces, special operations.
Well, again, I think I'm going to...
I just want... okay, Admiral Kirby, thank you so much. We